Dane, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Matt. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. I like to start off with the state of the state. Just give us a brief overview of what's happening today for you.
Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Dane, currently based out of Memphis, Tennessee. Work at Sun Studio as an engineer, do mixing there. Also worked out of Young Avenue Sound for a long time, managed the studio there for a few years, was an engineer, do a lot of freelance work. But predominantly, I guess I would say I'm a recording engineer and, do producing and mixing, and really got into music through playing music and being in bands. So a noisemaker more than anything. And right now I'm actually currently in Florida at a friend's home studio. And I'm kind of right now in this moment where you caught me, I'm taking some time to travel and see family and do freelance work. And actually just of last week, taking a extended time away from Memphis. But I love Memphis, and that is my home in many ways.
Awesome. Well, let's go back in time a bit. Let's kind of trace through all of this and how we got to this point. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is on the west coast of Florida. It's just south of Tampa. Went to high school here, went to college here, got into playing in bands of all types, really a lot of rock and roll, garage rock, punk rock orientated stuff. And then a couple years after college, I moved to Miami for a few years in 2015. And it was in 2015 that I started touring extensively and internationally, very consistently. Yeah, after maybe 3 years in Miami, moved back to St. Pete, where I was here for COVID and all that. And when that moment happened, I was in 3 bands, touring all the time. 2019 was the first year on my taxes, I was a freelance musician. I was starting to do it after years and years of, losing jobs, coming back from tour and all that. Yeah. Constantly, finding the next job just to lose it. When that happened, I had all this time, all the tours were canceled. And that's when I really got into the engineering side of things, and just kind of those first 11 months in Florida, locked myself in my room. I was lucky that I'd moved into a house with 5 other people, like a week before all the lockdowns and stuff. So I was in a house full of my friends who were all musicians. So I not only recorded myself, but was recording all my friends nonstop, 24/7. And then at the start of 21, me and a dear friend of mine, we left Florida in my van to just travel, to get out of, we'd had enough Florida. So we left, and less than 2 months later, I found myself in Memphis and working there.
Interesting. When you were growing up, did you have any fascination with recording at that point? Were you aware of album credits? Were you aware or interested in the production process?
I got really into music through stuff like The Clash, the Velvet Underground. There was a connection there that was inspiring to me, in the sense that I loved music so much. Hearing that type of music made me feel like I could maybe do it one day. But I loved songs that had sonics where I was like, what is that? I don't know what that is. Studio affected type of things. And yeah, I would look at the credits and be interested in that. And I remember just being a little kid with my little Walkman and stuff. I like to automate, you could call it like the volume. I would like to do my own little swells and stuff in the songs. And I remember on my brother's stereo, he had bass and treble and stuff, and I'd for sometimes with songs, just like mess with it in real time because I like the effect of it. But it was always something for the longest time for me that just seemed elusive. I remember always thinking like, man, I would love one day to be able to record myself or a band I'm in, but how am I going to get all that stuff? When am I going to be able to learn it? Like, I have to go to a studio. It just seemed so out of reach, but it was always something that intrigued me. And I loved when bands put like string sections or ethereal moments into songs. And I loved like the studio as an instrument.
What was your primary instrument when you were touring?
It was always bass guitar. That's
Okay.
what I started playing on and just took that as far as I could.
Do you remember your first studio experience as a bass player?
I do. And the first band I was in, maybe senior year of high school or shortly after, was with my twin brother who played guitar. So I, always had someone to play with and a drummer. And we didn't know how any of it worked. We came into it with the mindset of like, we're going to record one song. We're going to be a fine-tuned machine. And we would just practice. And we went into the studio. Like we didn't need a scratch vocal mic or anything. We just knew the song so well. We just knocked it out in one take. We thought that's the only way you can do it. So yeah, it was always a very nerve-wracking, like sacred, very focused thing. Like, oh man, we're going into the studio. Like we have to come correct type of thing.
I just love that though, because you came prepared.
Oh yeah. You're spending money. Yeah. And there's, when we recorded, it was always hourly, which was like, so really, we didn't have get as much bang for our buck as we could. So, we really just tried to knock it out.
Did you focus at all at that moment? I know that it's very nerve-wracking to come to the studio and you're paying that hourly rate. Did you pay any attention to what was going on the recording front, technologically speaking?
For the longest time, like I consider myself a slow learner, so I was always so hyper focused on like getting my part right, doing my job, that took a lot of my focus. But I always like loved being in the studio. It was such a natural boost of energy. It gave me a feeling like incomparable to anything else. And it was that same thing. I would go into a studio, I'd look at the engineer at the board, and I would always just go, man, that's so cool. I wish one day if I could have the time or whatever to get into that. It eluded me still. And it was like sensory overload. They'd pull up whatever DAW they were using, and I was just, whoa, what are these hieroglyphics? It was just so much for me. I was like, I gotta learn my bass. I gotta be good. I can't even focus on this.
Touching on your travels on the road as a player, I want to talk a little bit about that cycle of going on the road, playing the gigs, coming home, needing a day gig, and then, losing the day gig because you got to go on the next tour and do that. Can you talk a little bit about that cycle and that method of survival?
I think one thing when I was younger, that was helpful to me is like establishing, like, first things first, as much of a bare minimum baseline as you can. As in, I always, even if I didn't have much, tried to save my money, tried to never live over my means, and always have things like at least planned out 3 months in advance. And kind of what I do now with like all the work I had, I was always in multiple bands. It was always a revolving door of touring, of playing shows. Um, and I really, just starting in my early 20s, I was just so young and hungry to just get a taste of any of it. That was it was easy. It was fun to sacrifice comfort and stuff like that. Sleep anywhere, eat bad food, um, just lose a job. Okay, find the next one, even if it was a job that was not ideal, very manual labor. Like I lost my office job. Okay, uh, detail boats in the hot Florida sun. I just got to do it for 14 weeks to the next tour, So it was just that type of thing. I just wanted to be immersed in it so bad. I was happily willing to do anything.
So was there a strategy of, when you got a gig, when you got a, let me differentiate, when you got a job versus versus a gig, when you got a job, like let's say detailing boats, was there a, telling the person hiring you, hey, I'm disappearing in 14 weeks?
It was a case by case thing for the boats. No, because I might have not gotten the job.
That's right.
So yeah.
Better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yeah,
right?
I've learned that over time, and I was like, it was just like I have to tour, and a lot of times too, I knew a lot of my friends were musicians, and some were in similar boats. No pun intended. So we could swap out things like, hey, dude, I'm going on tour, and you want this boat gig for like 6 weeks, and then I'll take back when you go on tour. So it just kind of crazy game of musical chairs. But I did have a good little group of friends that were all just hungry and wanting to do music as a living, as a life, by whatever means necessary.
Can you talk about your experiences recording in the past as a player, and in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly? Like,
yeah,
how does your perception then about studio work versus, say, your perception now, where you now have all this experience?
Definitely. And I remember, I would say the majority of my time as a player recording and the majority of my experiences were tough, as in the sense like the engineer was just this almost non-existent entity. Not that I need like overt encouragement or to have my butt kissed or anything like that, but it was something where I always, it never brought the best out of me, the engineer. It was just a dry person, almost to the point of seeming disinterested. And I loved being in the band. I loved the act of recording, but I never really had an engineer in the past as a player that like I felt, I would say, safe around, as in safe to mess up, safe to be myself, get loose. I didn't. Recording in that aspect to me was actually always a struggle. And I just thought maybe that's a thing. Maybe the engineer is always this rigid, sterile entity that just records you, and they just overall seem disinterested. Maybe they hated the music. I don't know. But to be wondering that much, or, it makes you take away from what you're doing in the studio, going, damn, am I like, are they hating this? Is this not good? Maybe this is just the personality. It was hard to read.
Was this kind of a shared experience amongst the other band members that you were with?
I would say for the majority of the time, yes. Like, I remember I did a lot of my first recordings were with my brother, and I felt a similar vibe from him too. And I felt like he would make more jokes and try and, make the vibe light and stuff. We'd always try to like break the engineer, like as in not be mean or anything, but try to make them laugh, like see what they were thinking.
That's interesting. And I'm bringing this up because I really want the audience to hear this perspective of what the musician goes through. And I mean, I know a lot, myself included, I know a lot of us have musical backgrounds and that's how we started, just as you started. But I think it's really important to not forget those bad experiences and definitely embrace the good experiences. Did you ever have an experience as a player where you're like, oh, this is how it should be?
There were a couple times that were really enjoyable. There was one time we were, one of my bands was touring Europe, and we had like a day off. We were just driving around Europe, and my friend was like, I want to go to the street that the Beatles walked down. Can you put that in the GPS? And I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it. So we parked the car thinking we were close to it. We were lost trying to find it, walking down the street. And he's like, I'm going to jump in and get a coffee. And I was like, sure. We went into the cafe, talking to the barista there. And she was like, oh, y'all look like a band. Are you on tour and stuff? We're like, yeah, we're on tour. We have the day off. We're trying to find Abbey Road, the street, And she was like, actually, my boyfriend is an engineer at Abbey Road. He's sitting right behind you. And he was just like, hey. And he was this vivacious guy named Matthias. He was there on like a type of program that brought in people from abroad. Mm-hmm. So he was hungry, and he gave us a tour of the studio, brought us in. Later on the tour, he had a cancellation. We were still in the UK. He brought us in to record for free. And it was such a, not only because of that studio, but he was so vivacious, so happy. I think maybe because he was young and hungry and starting off, but he made us feel wanted. Not in the sense of like, oh, he's just talking us up and kissing our butts. Like, he just made us feel desired to be there, like brought the energy. And so that was really like a beautiful experience. And then later on tour, we recorded at Sun Studio. And because we recorded at Abbey Road, we were like, maybe we could do a 7-inch, record at Sun, and you have these 2 songs. It was this idea. And our friend in one of the bands knew the engineer at Sun from touring. He came to a show. We recorded with him, and it was the same thing. He had such a vivacious energy, and it felt so loose. It felt like you were recording with a friend. He ended up becoming a really good friend over time. But those 2 experiences, even though both engineers seemed more green or were starting off, they had this personality, this, I would say, this vivacious energy that made you feel relaxed, that made you feel wanted, that made you feel safe. I think feeling safe when you're recording, let your guard down, get comfortable, get to the core of what you're trying to do easier, more fluidly, is a very helpful thing, which with both those people did. And those 2 experiences like got me a fresh look on recording again.
It's interesting too, because, you talk about feeling safe, and I'm kind of like drawing my own conclusions here, thinking, do you mean not judged?
Yes, there you go. Not judged, not like some silent judge, rigid things. All the engineers in the past were just so stoic. It was like, I feel kind of tense on the inside here, not judged. That's an excellent way to put it.
That feeling of like, oh God, I messed up. The engineer thinks I'm a jerk or whatever,
Yes.
that judgment. And the other side of that is indifference. Like, whatever you guys want to do, that
Yes.
kind of attitude is, that just drives me nuts.
That never helped me. Again, I don't need them to be like so involved. Like, you need to do this, this, and this, but like, throw me a lifeline, sure, we can do another. What does that mean?
What am I going to do with that?
My God, man, I'm lost here. That never helped me. So to work with people finally, after years and years of not, that meant everything,
I'm sure that those experiences have shaped who you are as an engineer, because you don't want others to go through that shit that you went through.
Yeah, no way. And I never want to be dishonest with someone. I never will be. I'll never kiss their butt or just be like disinterested and blasé. But like, it's such a privilege to be in the studio. Of course I'm going to be attentive. Of course I'm going to be into it. And of course I'm going to try anything that anyone genuinely wants to try. If anyone goes, can we try this? I go, of course. That's what a studio's for. That's just like maybe one of my only few things is like, I'll always try anything any artist or musician wants to do. I've seen other engineers when I was assisting and coming up spend 20 minutes talking to an artist about how the idea wouldn't work. In that 20 minutes, you could have tried the idea. But that was something that had happened to me too in the past, and just made me feel closed in on and shut up and unsure, So to get revenge on the engineers who did me dirty, I'm going to be so good to the artists now that I work with. So anything is worth a try, and let the artist find out if they don't want to end up doing it or not from trying it.
As you progress through your music career and being in studio after studio and finally having some good experiences, once you relaxed, did you find that you started to pay more close attention to what was happening? Like, say, when you were at Abbey Road or when you were at Sun?
Definitely. And those 2 sessions was the first time I was like, oh, yeah, all right. And I started to look at the preamps. I started to watch the engineer and listen in. I would sit close to the board and listen to what they were talking about. When I recorded at Sun, I started asking questions. I felt comfortable enough. And, I finally was able to make good on my curiosity and start to explore that.
The difference between Sun and Abbey Road is so vastly different because Sun is based on a model of live playing, single takes, no overdubs, versus Abbey Road built on, the Beatles doing quite experimental work. So what a great bookend type studio situation to have these great experiences at, to get you to feel relaxed and to start to pay attention.
In the moment, it felt like such a dream to be a fly on the wall.
Knowing what you know now from your days being a player in the studio, what would your message be to your fellow engineers now who may have forgotten, hey, don't be the grumpy person, don't be the indifferent one? Like, is there any other thoughts about how one should approach the studio or consider approaching musicians when in the studio?
Yeah, I just think, don't forget, just because you're behind a board and on a screen, this is a humanistic art form. It is something that, I'm not saying you gotta be cracking jokes and all over the place, but it is something that takes personality and a lightheartedness, and you want to connect to someone in a genuine way as a person. You can be attentive without being corny or fake. You can be contemplative and meticulous without being mean or harsh or rigid or aloof. You're really on trying to achieve the same goal with that person. So really, like, when I work with someone, I'm genuinely interested in them. You know, I'm not just trying to come in and, oh, recording another rock band. Okay, this is how we do it. Just be quiet and listen to me. Like, I'm curious what they're influenced by. I want to listen to stuff that they like, maybe at the start, you know? So I want to, so much of recording is not just the fidelity of the music, but the character of the person. So I want to know their character. I want to learn it and best capture their character in a way that's genuine to them. And again, just trying anything anyone wants to do or is curious about. Because through experimentation, someone also gets out of their shell and reveals what they're trying to get at. So always encourage experimentation. And one way I found to have a lighter, less pressured studio recording, I didn't do it at first. It was like hourly, but I'll have the band or artist come in, have a meeting with them, and then set a flat rate for the day. So it's not them watching the clock. It's not a go, 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 pressure, pressure thing. It's something that works for them, works for the studio, works for me, and we can really just focus on the task at hand. That seems to help.
Yeah, I would agree on that, on the hourly thing especially, because hourly is, I mean, it's great for some tasks. However, for trying to record songs where that pressure is there, I think a day rate, it's like, it's a predictable outcome. It's like, okay, we know it's going to be X amount. Therefore, you know, we can budget for that. But when you're like, oh, wow, we just spent 10 hours and spent, you know, X amount per hour and we didn't get the results that we wanted because we were so concerned about like, oh, we're here another hour. There's another $75, $80, whatever, $100.
Right. You're less inclined to be like, I kind of want to try that thing, but there's not enough time, you know? So I tell the band, like, when we set like a flat rate, and I'm like, and we'll just work till we're all tired. And they're like, yeah, okay, you know, just work till the song, the session tells you when you're done, you know? So that's always seemed to help.
And I've found that in my years of doing this and working with people similar in age to me, there comes a point where you can almost tell everybody's kind of like, okay, we just got that done. Do we start another song? And then everybody kind of goes, and then, you know, you're like, okay, yep, let's just call it. We got some good work done today. Let's come back and hit it again tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, talk to me about the transition point here of where it clicked and you thought, I have to be an engineer.
It was a very like natural thing. Like I remember like we were just, one of my bands, we were getting ready to do a South by Southwest tour, had all these official shows lined up too. I was like, oh, I got a good feeling about this. COVID happened, and it turned into eventually I had next 3-4 months of tours lined up with different bands and stuff. All that went out the window. And I just remember feeling at the time, for whatever reason, funny enough, not discouraged. For some reason, after doing it for so many years, kind of felt this sense of relief in a way. And I was so stoked when I was just like, finally, like I was talking to one of my roommates and he was just like, dude, it's time for you to start recording on your own. And I was like, it is time. And I bought a laptop, bought these horrible little M audio monitors. And I was so happy to have this open-ended, uninterrupted, extended moment of time to do what I'd always wanted to do when I was younger and looking in the control room, always wondering about stuff. I felt grateful, strangely, in that moment to have that time. And I just dove right into it. I started on Logic and I just started. It was the type of thing where I would wake up in the morning, open my computer and be on my computer recording a homie till I couldn't keep my eyes open, and just did that 11 months straight. I was never, in that time, I wasn't thinking like, I'm going to be an engineer, producer. I was just like, I love this. I'm so happy. I thought my whole life would go by and I'd never have the chance to get down on this. And I was just so happy to do it. I just kept doing it. And I was so curious about learning more and more and more about it that when I left Florida and was traveling with my friend, even when we'd stop at people's houses, I'd bring my laptop in and record them or record stuff on my own on the road. The transition kind of happened like from all those years of touring. I'd recorded multiple times at Sun in different bands. And I had kind of a rapport and a friendship with one of the engineers who worked there. What would always happen was I'd record with the band there, and then everyone would be tired and go to bed, and me and him would stay up all night talking, going out in Memphis, just a natural thing. And we became good friends. And I remember we'd been traveling for almost 2 months, camping and crashing at people's houses, living out of the van. And my friend was like, I got a sublease in Memphis for a month. You want to do that? And I was like, yeah, I love Memphis. I've been a million times. I love it. Let's do it. And so I was like, I'm going to be there for a month. Let me call the engineer there and just see if I can be a fly on the wall. So I can just, I just didn't want to stop. I wanted to just keep learning, keep experiencing it, So I called him and I was like, hey, I've, been learning how to record over lockdown. I'm going to be in Memphis for a month. Could I come and be a fly on the wall? I could just sit in the back and watch you. And he was very stoked and receptive on that. And he was like, yeah, I actually need help right now. So if you can come and help me and be of real help, I'll pay you. And I was like, well, all right then, that was, well, okay. So I really went into it with just real focus, real okay, wow, this feels legitimate. And after doing that for a week or two, he was like, oh, it's a shame you're not staying, because if you stayed, I could keep you working on sessions and keep paying you. And I just was like, I'll stay. And I stayed. My friend kept traveling. He bought his own van and left Memphis and kept traveling. And I stayed, and what turned into a month is well over 4 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, that switch. And I could see it as you were telling the story in your face. It's like, oh, and I'll pay you. Oh, something that you would probably do for free.
Yes.
And here somebody wants to pay you. That changes the dynamic of it greatly.
Yeah, I just hadn't really put those two things together. I'd been scratching by since 2019 from touring and sync placements and more in that realm, of making the music in that dynamic. But it just added this layer of legitimacy of, oh, okay, yeah, let's go kind of feeling. It almost felt more purposeful in a way.
Mm-hmm. Did it make you feel like, oh, I have to be professional, I have to be accountable?
I never wanted to be delusional, and I knew I didn't come from a technical background. I knew I never went to school for this. So it's not just me making my own music in whatever methods. Once that started happening, I started taking pictures of mics, and on the next picture, I'd write the name of the mic, what type of mic it was. I started learning as much technical information day in and day out. Before that, it was more of getting familiar with learning a DAW, learning the ins and outs, learning how to record and make it work. Now I wanted to understand the science of it, the technical aspects of it, and commit these things and know these things as in and out as I could, because I would just naturally feel fraudulent if I just went willy-nilly into it. I wanted to know as much as I could.
What has been the takeaway for you about working at Sun? Because that, like we discussed earlier, that's a very different model there of how they work in comparison to, as we discussed, Abbey Road. Can you talk a little bit about what a crash course that has been, and I assume got you up to speed rapidly?
Yeah. The best thing about before working there was that I had recorded there maybe 3 or 4 times in bands. So I knew what a band had to do to make that room work. I knew the sound of that room to a sense already, and how you could use that room to make things work. But it was something like, oh, you have to set up fast. You have to troubleshoot fast and get things going and break down and set up. And you have to have a whole band ready to go in no time. Recording on my own, taking my time, setting up things, it really impressed upon not doing things sloppy, but doing things fast, knowing things well enough that you can do things reflexively. And that took me a long time. And I, would practice independently, practiced in real time at the studio. Like, you just can't beat firsthand experience. I'm a very hands-on learner. So just doing session after session. And luckily, I started assisting first. There were other people I could ease into it. Sometimes there was another assistant. But I just had this internal sense of pressure that I had to be ready anytime for anything. And I think that's the key. That was the thing in Memphis that allowed me to get in there and start making a living, was if someone called me, I picked up first ring. If someone needed someone at 2 a.m., I was ready. If an engineer didn't show up because they were messed up or who knows, they called me, and I went into sessions when I wasn't ready for them, but I just didn't see another option. So just kind of some baptism by fire type of stuff.
Can you talk a little bit about what a typical session looks like at Sun in terms of not only setting up the band, but the limited amount of choices that one has at Sun?
The studio manager, Lydia Fletcher, is super awesome. What she would do is maybe the day of, either walking right in the door or an hour before, she'd be like, okay, it's going to be a 5-piece band, this, and this. A lot of times you really don't know what you're going to record until the second you walk in there. There's maybe, how many pre's? 14, something like that, 15. So it's just the type of thing where I almost like the limitations. You only have this, and this to use, and the room, and this many mics. So it's like this little game of Tetris. And I just try to go, okay, 4-piece band, drums. There's a session we did recently. We used one mic on the drums. We used the RCA 44 just for the whole kit, kind of down right over the kick. It sounded great. Kind of like a crotch drum mic setup, Put the U87 as the room, put it in Omni, guitar amp, okay, just have an SM57, that'll work. And just kind of do this game of Tetris using the limitations. Actually, for some reason, kind of put me at ease, because it's like, well, that's all we got, so we have to make it work. There's no other choice. And that's what I like about that studio. And the trick there is just, you record everything in the one room. So a lot of times, I'll do bass DI, unless it's a stand-up, and try to do baffles. There's two baffles there you can set up. There's also music stands and blankets, so you can make your own baffles for like a guitar. But it's very minimal. And I really think using the limitations, thinking of the limitations as a good thing, is helpful. And so it's just a kind of, okay, let's do it. I try to do at least one thing I haven't done before. but not at the expense of, I'm going to throw us in the weeds. I try to make sure the basics make sense to me, you know?
Does analog recording still happen there?
So there's the Ampex 352 tape machine that will like do the slapback effect, like a lot of times run the vocal through, but it feeds into the Snake in the live room, which feeds in to the pre's, and then that goes into Pro Tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sun Studios with Pro Tools.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've had it for quite a while now. But the sound of that room, I think, is so unique. Another point of working there is like when you work there or when I do a mix from a session there, it's really like making it all sound right together. You have to record in that room and mix as all one thing because of certain things of bleed and stuff like that. But the sound of that room does really shine through and capture that aesthetic of that studio still, even though it ultimately ends up going to Pro Tools.
When you go back and listen to recordings that were done there way back when, can you still hear the characteristics of that room?
Yes, definitely. Even on like a minimal thing like Blue Moon, you do hear the ambience of that room. I think it's very unique, and there's even certain spots, like I've been putting a room mic in this certain spot where you walk around the room and you walk in this one spot, your voice changes. Timbre of your voice is different. It's very unique. So I've been putting my room mic right there.
Oh, great.
But yeah, you do hear it. I know it's it's just a room, but it does have its own character in it for sure. I'll record a band and sometimes they want me to mix it. When I'm mixing it, no matter where I'm mixing it, I have to like keep in mind to not get too in the weeds on one thing, that it's really, you want everything to be extra cohesive together because of just the dynamic of setting up and bleed and recording in that room. You know, the guitar mic, even with a baffle, or the vocal mic will have a little bit of drum bleed, and the room mic in there. So I just really try to keep that in mind.
And I assume that a lot of bands, and I'm making this shit up in my head, so if I'm wrong, tell me. I'm assuming a lot of bands just happening, that are on the road or passing through are like, hey, let's see if we can book Sun and just go in for a night.
Yeah, definitely. That definitely happens all the time. And sometimes you get people that aren't even, they're more of a hobbyist, which is fine. And I've recorded a handful of people where they're like, this is my first time recording. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go. Because of just the novelty of it, But it is a mixed bag. But what I do find best for that studio is like a live punk band or rock band or something that comes and that you want to capture the performative element of the band. I think that's what that room does best.
Love it. I know that you do this, you've done the Sun thing, but there was a period of time there where you were over at Electrical. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just like going back to like how I came into the audio world, it wasn't through school, it wasn't through a mentorship. It was one happy accident after one happy accident. After doing that for a few years, I was like, man, it would be great to study under a real Jedi Master, a real mentor. It was a night before I was recording a session at this studio called Young Avenue Sound in Memphis. And I was looking up just, YouTube videos on mic and guitar amps. And I came across this video of this guy with a beanie and glasses talking about recording guitar amps. I thought the way he was talking about it was so beautifully and humanely articulated. And he said, it was just a simple thing, but he's like, you don't always have to put the mic right on the amp. I'm not listening to it with my ear right on the amp. So a lot of times I'll put the mic 6 inches back or something like that. And I was like, duh, of course. Why haven't I done that? I just put it right next to the amp because I've seen everyone always do that, and that's the norm. And I was like, who is this guy? And I was like, oh, it's Steve Albini. I didn't know the face. I knew his work. I was just like, man, this guy's just incredible, the way he's talking about the craft. Seems to have such a genuine, intricate love for it. I was like, well, I wonder where he works. And I was like, oh, he has a studio in Chicago. So just on a whim, I sent like an internship request and just kind of gave him my spiel, and the intern manager called me a couple days later and we had an interview, and she gave me like a tech quiz, and it worked out all right. And they let me come over there for a couple months, and yeah.
Which is interesting because you had been at it for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you were like, what, 4 or 5 years into the recording journey?
Yeah, about 4. And but I've always felt this like bastardized feeling of myself with coming up in it, and always like there's so much technical stuff to learn. Like as I was saying to you earlier, like I'm still down to be an intern in the right context. I'm, being in the studio, learning something new, working with someone new, working with new gear. There's so many variables to it. It really feels infinite to me. So I was stoked to go over there and be an intern. I was happy to do it because I think I would just learn something new.
But your timing was happened to coincide with Steve's death.
Yeah, very, very crazy turn of events. Your first week working there is just one day. So I remember I got there, like read the internship manual they had, which was very meticulous. It was awesome. I loved how all the attention to detail. The studio is incredible. And I just worked with him on my first day. Like the next day I had off, it was just the 1 day week to like ease into my internship. And I am very thankful that, because I had the thought, I was like, is it too strong to try and work with Steve on my first day to ask him? And I asked him if I could sit in, and I'm very thankful too that I asked him a million questions. I just thought, I'm here. I've traveled all this way from Memphis. I just have to go for it. And I was taken back at how insanely kind he was and encyclopedic with answering the questions. Like I remember he was setting up the mics, and I was a little nervous too. So I was like, hey, just let me know if this is a bad time to be asking you questions, or if this is just, if I'm being a distraction in any way. And he was like, no, not at all. What I'm doing right now is very much a mindless task. And I was like, oh, what? He's like miking the bass cab and stuff. And it was just the type of thing where I'd ask him a question and he would go on at such length. Like there would even be times I'd ask him a question. I'd start to I didn't want to be too much. I'd start to maybe back out of the room, and he'd keep talking, keep explaining. And I really felt a genuine, love of the craft from him, and was just so kind. He'd gotten back from traveling, and he was a little tired and stuff, but he was so nice and so eager to share his knowledge. It really had a profound impact on me.
He would explain something almost like Mr. Spock, no exertion of emotion or being irritated, just the facts.
Yeah, it was really, really beautiful. The intricacy and length and how eager he was to talk about it, and just felt very grateful. Because I didn't know. I didn't know if he'd be strict or whatever, but he was just so kind, so kind.
And then you had the next day off, and
Yeah.
then didn't, and he passed the following day. Is that right?
The following night, yeah. Yeah, wild. And I couldn't imagine I hadn't really even met much of the other staff at Electrical Audio. I bet some of them didn't even know there was a new intern until the next week I worked and stuff like that. But I just couldn't imagine what they were going through. And I remember asking the internship manager, like of course, waited a few days to talk to her. And I was supposed to come in the next day, so, sent her a lengthy message about everything and just prefaced, like, if this is not a good time or y'all need time and space for an intern right now, somebody new, I understand, and I don't want to be in the way or whatever. And she said, we're going to just carry on as planned. So I just thought the best thing I could do was to just show up and, do the internship things and to honor things best I could, just learn as much as I could in my time there, and ask questions and try not to annoy anybody with my questions, but I didn't know what else to do. But the only impression I got from him in my brief time was such a intricate love and knowledge of the craft. What else can I do in that situation but be a good intern, and then whenever I can, ask as many questions. So that's it.
Was it different for you, or was it eye-opening to come from Sun, and working there and that method, and then coming to electrical and seeing how things are done there?
Yeah, in Memphis, I'd worked a lot at Sun. As I said, I've worked at this other studio called Young Avenue Sound a lot. But what I loved about Electrical Audio was you could be relaxed there and it was easygoing, but the studio was pristine. Like, every point on the patch bay works. I'm not skipping numbers and counting. I was always used to, okay, this thing in this studio doesn't work. This preamp makes noise. This patch point doesn't really work as well. Every studio in Memphis, there was all these little things to know to get around. And their studio was just immaculate and beautiful and so high functioning. And the rooms acoustically sounded incredible. And it really made me just almost in a way up my standard of like, oh, when I get back to Memphis, I'm going to do this, this, and this in the studio and try this. And I just really such high optimization in that studio. They really put so much love and care into their gear and into the sessions and treat the studio with so much respect and love. It's a bummer and from managing a studio in the past, it's a bummer when someone comes in or an outside engineer, trash is full, place is a mess. I know that's not what matters is the music, but leave a place better than you found it. Leave it, treat it with care like it's your own. It's precious, it's sacred grounds. And it just felt so respected and loved being in that place. Everything was just beautiful and taken care of beautifully. Very inspiring to be there.
I was actually a den leader for my son's Cub Scout troop. And we learned this concept at one point. This is a million years ago. My kids are much older now. But we learned this concept of when you go camping, the leave no trace concept.
Yes.
It's like, you don't leave your shit everywhere. You don't leave your your wrappers and water bottles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the studio, in that world, when people don't use that and reset the studio for the next person, it really can be a red flag.
Yes, definitely. And for me, getting started in Memphis with such limited experience and knowledge at the time, those were things that I can't stress to anyone trying to enter that world, is like, I was always early. I always left it better than I found it. Not because I'm so high and mighty, but it's a studio, and these things just helped ease me into being called back. It does make a huge difference when you come back and someone used the room and you go, oh, wow, nice. Yeah, it's ready to go. As opposed to just, you don't want to spend 20, 25 minutes cleaning up after someone. It's just unprofessional. What else does that tell me about that person,
Like you said, you'd already had some years under your belt at Sun, and then here you are showing up in Chicago at Electrical and doing that. I love the beginner's mindset that you carried with you, because I think some people would get a few years under their belt at Sun and go, okay, yeah, I'm done. I've done the Sun thing, and I've learned everything there is to know. I'm not saying that I know anybody that's done that, because but I love that you were open to, all right, well, let me go intern. Let me go through that process.
Yeah, I still feel like a beginner. It's just time in a studio is invaluable. It's incredible. So to get it in any way just feels like such a privilege to me. And even if I'd learn just one new little thing or learn one new little approach, it'll just magnify what I already know. The more things to think about and consider and see and realize, that's just everything, So any opportunity to do that is a joy.
And I will acknowledge, you are, in the bigger picture of experience, it's still way early days. However, I think one thing that the audience and you and I need to take into account here is those years spent as a player playing in studios and recording in studios. That experience that you bring to the table is a whole nother set of experiences that, you can't discount that. To me, that's just as much a part of it. So while your engineering time has been short, in the broader picture of things, those early days of recording as a player were the beginning of it.
Most definitely. I think it really informed me because, as I said earlier, a lot of my experiences, it left something to be desired. I know how I would want someone to treat me. So I kind of just apply that to who I'm working with.
Other than the work that you do at Sun, how do you get your clients now?
Like, one, I still do sync work with my solo music and bands and stuff like that. But I've just, from years of recording people, the best thing for me is actually, even though it's 2025, has been word of mouth. Their friend works with me, and then I mix what we worked on, or they come back with something they had recorded in the past and want mixed. They then tell their friend. And right now, the majority of my work is actually remote mixing and stuff like that. I don't know how long it will last, but that's what I'm predominantly doing right now in this moment. And I'm mixing stuff for people that I've never even met, but we have a good rapport from talking or texting. I just try to treat everything I do like it's the last thing I'll ever do. If I keep serving the music, maybe the music will continue to have me. That kind of thing, So yeah, word of mouth. You make someone feel good, you do a good job, they're going to want you back. They're going to tell their friends about it.
And I want to remind the audience that, Dane, you're essentially kind of traveling in similar footsteps to former WCA guest Matt Ross Spang, who's been on the show a couple times, because Matt also did a stint at Sun.
Yes, yeah.
And then went on to do some, monumental things. So it's interesting to see that you're there now, and I'm really curious to see where you're gonna go and what we're gonna see from you in years to come.
Thanks.
Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned you touched on your approach to money, about living below your means. Does that approach still hold today? Now your world is much more multifaceted, but do you continue to utilize that as an operating method with your financial approach?
Yeah, I still live within my means. My means have gotten bigger, you know? It's funny enough, once you get into a specialty thing like recording and mixing, you end up making more from that type of work than any 9-to-5 I ever had. So that's a great thing. But yeah, continue to live within your means, and over time, that should expand with your work, with your experience. I'm more inclined to spend money on a new plugin or piece of gear before something else that perhaps someone could argue could be more life essential, but it will return on itself. You spend it on a new piece of gear, new plugin, you're going to use it, and in a couple weeks, couple months, make it back and then some. Like with touring, I try to have as much time booked in advance as I can. Right now, I have enough work booked till the end of August. I know it's not much, but for me, that's good. Maybe by the end of August, I'll be a couple months down the road from there. So I really just try to take it in stride. And I do think that I just view it as it could be gone any day. And that's okay. I'm going to enjoy it and do the best with it while I have the privilege to be able to do it.
Do you still tour as a musician from time to time?
I had stopped touring from February, March of 2020 until just a couple months ago. I'm in one of my old bands is called Jeremy and the Clones. It's with my twin brother. We're the Clones. And our friend Jeremy. He's Jeremy. Jeremy is the one who I left Florida with and traveled in the van. And I stayed in Memphis and he kept going. He's a very dear friend of mine. Just in the last few months, kind of got the band back together to do some touring. And we're going to do some touring later this year. It's nice to be back in that world. I really thought I was done with it. And I was going to strictly be engineering and producing and mixing and stuff. But to go back to it now with almost 5 years in between or more gives me a real fresh perspective. And when I was younger, we always toured, we did love the music and all that, but we always had goals. Oh, we got to tour and then get our vinyl pressed and do this. Now I just tour, enjoy it in real time. I enjoy the people I'm with, and I have no real goals for the music. I'm just enjoying the experience. And so I'm really happy to be on that side of touring when I do it now.
Now with this recording experience coupled with your musical experience and touring experience, I'm curious if you have a fresh perspective on musicians surviving and supporting what they do while still as an engineer, maintaining your you've got to make a living, obviously, but I'm always on the hunt for asymmetrical ways that musicians can make money. I know that some, depending on, who they are, can make some money on streaming, some can't. Do you have new perspective now, having worked in studios, as you enter being on the road again and thinking, oh, how are we going to make this work financially?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was younger, I thought I would make a living one day playing bass in a band and touring. That's a little too narrow. What I realized from, making a better living in engineering and production is you need to be doing a million things. If you're just recording, you're probably not really going to make as good a living or a living. Like, you have to record, you have to mix, you have to master, you have to produce. I still do sync stuff with bands, with companies where they send prompts and you compose the music sometimes in 24 hours. I make beats and, have be able to appreciate and work on anything from a punk rock band to a Memphis trap beat, So an appreciation and understanding and love for multiple genres, for multiple aspects of the art form. There's been weeks where, hey, I'm composing a weird little soundtrack for an indie film. That's all I have to do the next 2 weeks. Next week, I'm mixing an album. Next week is mastering and recording. So it's to really have a revolving door for me. It's a multitude of genres and styles and different parts of engineering that are constantly being used. I don't think I would be doing nearly as well without that revolving door.
And audience, if you've listened to me for any length of time, you know what I'm about to say. What Dane is talking about is diversification, and that's my jam. Man, it's been great talking to you. Your perspective is refreshing, and I think your approach and your reverence for the engineering craft it's very clear to me. So it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I appreciate you making time for me.
Likewise. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, you take care.
You too.